What's up and welcome back. I'm John Stark from ActTheMovieGuy.com, your favorite blind film critic. And today, it's another anniversary. It's the 35th anniversary of All Dogs Go to Heaven. Oh, what a classic from my childhood. Uh, this film has text-to-speech audio description on Amazon. So in case you're looking for it, and it's probably always going to have that. This is one of those weird cases where Amazon now owns the film because it was an MGM release. So they're only going to be as motivated to put audio description on this as they want. Like, there is nobody else who's going to come along and be like, well, here's the humans. So is it at least good for TTS? We'll talk about it. But from a blind audience, I've got a purple hat on backwards. I'm wearing a Fortnite t-shirt, black sunglasses as usual. And let's talk about 35 years of All Dogs Go to Heaven. This is one of Don Bluth's films. For anybody who is, I don't know, a child and doesn't know who Don Bluth is, he is... however you feel about Hayao Miyazaki is how people felt about Don Bluth when Don Bluth was coming along. He sort of developed the biggest challenge to Disney at the time. He was a former Disney animator who didn't really like the direction the studio was going in. And long before there was ever a Pixar, really before Hayao Miyazaki really kind of broke through into the States, he started his own animation studio with Secret of Nim. Which translated into An American Tail, which translated into Land Before Time, and All Dogs Go to Heaven. He's also responsible for like Thumbelina. We're Back. I'm gonna forget some films, so I'm never gonna try to name them all. But Don Bluth, and of course sequels, because like there's a sequel to An American Tail. There's a sequel to All Dogs Go to Heaven. So Don Bluth definitely had his own things. He loved using Dom DeLuise as a voice actor, and so that was the thing. Dom definitely benefited a lot from this. Here he plays Itchy, who's sort of like the number two character here, the best friend to the lead, and one of his little signatures. He incorporates music rather well. Music was incorporated really well in An American Tail. Somewhere Out There ended up becoming sort of like a classic from the 80s. Here he has sort of a host of songs written for All Dogs Go to Heaven, sort of matching that musical vibe at the same time that Disney would revitalize their movie musicals with The Little Mermaid in the same year. He came out with All Dogs Go to Heaven, which has very interesting vibe to its songs. This is basically a gangster flick. It's basically like a 1930s old school gangster flick, to the point where the villain in this, his name is Carface. There's no S, but I mean it's really pushing like a certain angle to that. You could basically replace all these dogs with humans and you would just have a mob movie, like an animated weird, like why is this a cartoon mob movie? But it's basically, that's what it is. It's a palatable mob movie for kids. There was a scene too that I wondered, because I remembered it differently. I was like, did they replace it? Did we go back through this and did we edit it out? And I couldn't find definitive proof, but there's a scene where they use a ray gun, and I was like, is that in place of a Tommy gun? Is it like legitimately replaced? Or did they actually have a ray gun? Because it feels so out of place. Because obviously, like in a gangster film, you would have a ray gun. You would have a Tommy gun in that kind of film, but it feels like one of those things that we could have gone back through and changed out. But they would have had to change out the sound effects to it. It's one of those weird blind things where I was like, what was this actually there? Did they, I mean, like, not that I expect Don Bluth to necessarily have drawn a Tommy gun, but I mean, wouldn't be the first time that a gun was featured in an animated film. So, uh, maybe, you know. So, yeah, that was a question mark for me, not being able to see. But what All Dogs Go to Heaven has are some really interesting stories. First of all, the voice cast. Uh, Two of the voice casts here are Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson. They filmed this when they were together. Burt plays the lead; he plays Charlie, and Lonnie Anderson essentially plays his side hustle, who has just an ungodly amount of kids. Uh, and they don't really like say that they're his. And they call him Uncle Charlie. I think that's just because he's like a really bad absentee father, but they're probably his kids, for being honest. The film, it's aimed at kids, so they just didn't really want to explain these things to kids. But yeah, she has a little bit of a part in here. It's mostly Burt Reynolds as Charlie, who's a little bit of a gangster type. I remember the alligator, and I know I had like an alligator toy growing up as a kid. And I kept waiting for him to show up, and I didn't realize that he's only in like a little bit of the film. But the New Orleans alligator, giant alligator scene, like that's in this. But the big story about All Dogs Go to Heaven is sort of the thing that I don't think a lot of people know or remember, because it's not like you tell your kids this when you go to the theaters. So the tragic backstory to All Dogs Go to Heaven, which is just going to break your heart, is the little girl, Anna Marie, who is the girl that they find in this, who can talk to animals, like all animals. In this world, animals can't cross talk to each other. They can only talk to like their own type. Dogs talk to dogs, horses talk to horses, rats to rats. They don't like, they can't hear each other. They can only hear their species. So, but Anna Marie can hear all of them. And so Carface finds her, and she's like a street urchin who has no parents. And he kidnaps her and chains her up and makes her talk to animals so that he can use the information that he gains for financial purposes. She has this song too, because her great dream is that like one day maybe she'll have like a family, like a mom and dad. And it's really like heartbreaking. And the film is all like, eventually Charlie comes and rescues her, and then she's like, well, one day you're gonna help me find a mommy and daddy. And Charlie's like, yeah, sure, kid. He doesn't really intend on doing that at the point in time. He's already died and come back, and he's just kind of trying to continue to scheme his way through life. And he sees her as sort of exactly how Carface sees her, as like a golden ticket. He's just nicer to her. And yeah, and she has more, I want to say like, she can do more. Like she actually has more mobility. Like, I don't know, they have more fun. It's a completely different dynamic than Carface that keeps her like chained in the basement. So, Charlie, eventually they find these parents, and then she has this moment where she gets mad at Charlie because Charlie steals this guy's wallet, but at least it gives her like something. It gives her like a driver's license with an address, and she sings a song that is really sad, and sort of like maybe from Annie, maybe far away or maybe real nearby. It's this cute little like adorable girl voice singing the song. Well, a couple of things. First of all, it's not the actress doing it. It was they had to get somebody else, another little girl, to sing the song, because the little girl, this was hitting way too hard to home to her. So the backstory here is that the girl that was cast in All Dogs Go to Heaven in this role. She was sort of like a rising child actress, and she moved into this All Dogs Go to Heaven role. And they even modeled a lot of the way that the character looks and moves and everything after the girl. I can't think of her name, but she was murdered by her father, and her mother was murdered too, and he burned the house down, and that all happened before the release of All Dogs Go to Heaven. So yeah, she never made it even to the release of her movie. But she had an abusive father at home, and it was only getting worse and worse. And I guess he was beating the mom, and so the child was sort of witnessing this, and the child is, of course, the paycheck at the time because she's the one that's working in Hollywood, and I guess Dad didn't like that so much, so he killed his daughter and his mother and set them on fire. So that's the happy, true backstory behind All Dogs Go to Heaven. Is while Burt Reynolds and Lonnie Anderson and people like that may be the cast, it's really this little girl is really the one that ends up going to heaven. So even though in the film she eventually finds the parents that she needs and has the happy ending she deserves. So if this movie doesn't already make you sad because it's literally about like a dog dying and finding out, they go to heaven, they go up, and he's just not ready to die yet. So he steals this clock and then goes back down to earth, his watch, and this pink whippet or whatever is like, you can never come back. So he goes back down, and eventually he learns how to be a good boy, a good dog, and make life choices that aren't so selfish. Anyway, it's got some fun music in it, and most Don Bluth films, he attaches more realism into things. He doesn't feel like Disney with their everything needs a happy ending. He wasn't really big into that. He just kind of wanted to he believed that kids were able to see the world more complex, with more complexities. So he challenged his audience, and you can see that through themes that he has in The Secret of NIMH, in American Tail, in Land Before Time, which has a tragically, like, everybody knows the beginning of that film is just fucking, like, soul-crushing. And then, of course, All Dogs Go to Heaven. And then, this tragic backstory happens, and he has to finish the film and release it. And, yeah. So, I would say real life caught up with Don Bluth. You're right. Life isn't perfect. And, your casting choices prove how shockingly realistic that actually is. So I love Don Bluth films. I think he had a short run, but the run that he had was great. And for people who love animation, and for people who came from this time period and remember his films, they didn't all gross what the Disney films grossed, but that doesn't mean that people don't look back on them and be like, wow, these are classics. That's the thing about Don Bluth films, that they didn't need the same money as the Disney films. Like the Disney films, yeah, sure, they made like hundreds of millions of dollars. And All Dogs Go to Heaven didn't make that. American Tail didn't make that. Land Before Time didn't make that. But nobody's not calling those films. I mean, those films are still called classics. Land Before Time has like 18 sequels. Not all technically produced by Don Bluth. They were all straight-to-video sequels. But American Tail, Five Goes West went to theaters, and All Dogs Go to Heaven 2 went to theaters. So, unfortunately, the Land Before Time sequels are very different, and they aim at a very young audience, and they feel nothing like, they've lost all the magic of Don Bluth, and you can tell. So, I really enjoyed this trip down memory lane. The audio description track, it just sounds like middling quality, very mid. It's not the best audio description TTS track that I've heard come out. It's obviously an older one, but I've heard some really just truly atrocious TTS audio description tracks from Amazon that obviously were never quality checked. They spot quality check, which means if there's a fuck up that is not where they spot checked, they would note it. They would have no idea. So I would say listening to The Terminator, which a friend of mine has also watched on Amazon, and was like, this is atrocious. It is. It's one of the worst films that they have on there with TTS audio description. That is probably a great example of it's so awkward, it's so poorly written, and then on top of it, it also blows over dialogue. So it just, I don't know. It's baffling, and it's on a movie that people are watching too. It's like, it's not even on. Sometimes they put TTS audio description on films where I'm like, I don't even know what that is. It's like, is that a Lifetime movie? What is that? It's like, they're so random. Sometimes I feel like they literally just pick them at random sometimes. But obviously they were like, well, we have MGM now, so we're inclined to do it for our products. But they obviously didn't think people wanted a 35-year-old animated cartoon with human audio description, so they did it with TTS audio description. Anyway, or possibly it just existed longer than, I don't know. I'm watching this after they own it, so now it's on them. If they want to make this up better, they can, because they own the rights. So it's all on Amazon. But I enjoyed All Dogs Go to Heaven as a kid, and I enjoyed it now. And when you look at the backstory, as a kid, nobody told me the backstory of the stuff. But when you look it up and you sort of dive into the weeds, and you're like, oh, I'm going to be reviewing this. What am I going to talk about? And you're like, oh my God, is that what really happened? That's like literally the only thing I want to talk about, is this poor girl and memory and all that kind of stuff. And yes, some child stars had a rough time. Obviously, Poltergeist is such a great example of that, but those kids were not, you know what I'm saying? Like, terrible things happen to people who were in Poltergeist, but not, I don't think, to this extent. And the suggestion, at least from everything that I was able to find, was that she was already sustaining, or at least it was believed that she was sustaining this level of abuse, sort of even while she was filming. Like, her dad had been abusive this whole time. So she's sitting there talking about how she, wants to find a mom and dad who will love her. And it's just like, man, it's fucking heartbreaking. Even when she's reading the dialogue, what she's like, what her home life is like, and where she ends up. And it's just like, it puts the film in a completely different context. And I'm glad I ruined your day. Welcome. Thank you for clicking on this review. But I love All Dogs Go to Heaven, and I'm glad that that it lining up with a year that felt like I could say anniversary, was worth watching. So forced me to watch it again, and because I forgot how much I like this. I really love Don Bluth movies. So I think this is the first one that I reviewed for the channel. I think this is the first Don Bluth movie that I have on my channel. And I want to have more. I want to have all of them. So maybe not like Pebble and the Penguin, but like the rest of them, he didn't. Sometimes he was just on base. Not everything was a home run. He just got on base. So, but a great animator, and offered a lot to the history of animation. I'm giving All Dogs Go to Heaven an A. I I think for what it is and for what it does, uh, you can pick a little bit into it and say, well, then Carface goes to heaven. And it says all dogs go to heaven is the not some or most. So that means that, yes, even Carface has to go to heaven at the end of this film. All dogs go to heaven. It's a weird fucking rule. I realize Carface is terrible. He's the villain. He shouldn't be going to heaven. All dogs go to heaven is the title of the film. When you realize what the title of the film means, it doesn't mean all dogs go to heaven except Carface. Like, so yeah. And even the scenes where they like mention hell or they suggest that there is a hell, it's always like Charlie is dreaming it or it's suggestive. He never actually goes to hell. So it's like, maybe it's all in his head, you know? Anyway, thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. And I'll see you guys on the other side.